Okay, folks. Alex, thank you. Very well done. A lot of very good information. We appreciate you taking the time to do it. Okay, we're moving on to our next panel discussion. It's going to be Women of NATE and Women of Wireless Leadership Forum, WWLF. And the moderator for this event will be Carolyn Hardwick. She is now the VP of WWLF. And Carolyn's extensive career in telecom began in 2000 with Airgate PCS, also known as Sprint PCS, as a project coordinator. As part of her professional development, she joined WWLF in 2003 and has served in various roles on the board since 2011. In fact, I think you're a past president too. Am I right? Yeah. During her tenure in the industry, Carolyn has held various positions in site development, business development, engineering, operations, and executive management. She's a graduate of Clemson University and also happens to be one of the nicest people in this industry. Carolyn, go ahead and introduce your panel.
Thank you, sir.
You bet.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. So I'm Carolyn Hardwick, and these are our panelists, again, representing WWLF and Women of NATE. So immediately to my left is Amelia De Jesus. Amelia is the Vice President of Workforce Solutions at WIA, which is the Wireless Infrastructure Association. With 20 plus years of experience in wireless telecom and broadband, Amelia shares insight across the U.S. to support America's broadband workforce through innovative partnerships. Amelia is a leading voice in telecom. You've probably heard her on panels. She's often on panels. She blends her expertise with advocacy to shape the industry's future. Amelia's commitment to diversity, growth, and strategic leadership have been prevalent in her career as an executive, but also in volunteer organizations that she serves. She is a past president of WWLF, and she's a member of the Georgia Wireless Association. Off-duty and in her community, Amelia is the vice chair of the Terminus Legion backing Atlanta United FC, and also volunteers with Meals by Grace and the Children's Restoration Network. Welcome, Amelia.
Thank you.
Next to Amelia is Deb Bennett. Deb is the Vice President of Apprenticeship for the Wireless Infrastructure Association. In her role, she leads the operations of TIRAP, which is the Telecommunications Industry Registered Apprenticeship Program. Deb and her team provide technical assistance, training resources, and access to incentive funding for registered employee sponsors. Their goal is to speed the adoption of registered apprenticeship. Deb serves as a WIA staff liaison for WWLF, and in this vital role, she provides guidance to the WWLF board and our committee chairs. Deb is also a past president of WWLF and also served as an executive director of education while she was in WWLF. Welcome, Deb. And then Monica Vink is on the end there. Monica serves as the marketing director for Ontivity, steering the company's marketing, strategy, and branding, online presence, and social engagement. So a lot at Ontivity. Her professional journey encompasses roles in marketing, digital media, advertising, and sales in support of wireless and broadband. During her tenure in the industry, Monica has contributed to the establishment of numerous startups and the management of social media for major players in sectors from logistics to manufacturing. Monica is actively involved with NATE and engages with multiple industry groups and wireless associations. She shares her expertise to the Tower Family Foundation on the Endowment Committee. As a committee member of Women of NATE and also a contributor to the NATE mentorship program. Additionally, Monica serves as the treasurer for the Minnesota State Wireless Association and is a member of WWLF. So welcome to the panelists. So if you all read the title of our panel, it is Workforce Development in the Digital Age. And we wanted to hit on a couple of things today. So talking about the workforce, talking about workforce development, and also talking about the trends. And a lot of people have talked about, you know, maybe some things that are threats to the industry, but we also have a lot of opportunities, so we want to hit on those things as well. So, Monica, I wanted to start with you, if I could. Tell us a little bit about how the workplace looks today, thinking about how in the last couple of years, what we consider the workplace looks very different than it did probably pre-pandemic. So tell us a little bit about the trends.
Yeah, so I think we can all agree that the work environment and the workplace looks very different. You know, COVID obviously changed a lot for all of us. We now have, you know, scenarios like work from home and hybrid type of an environment where we have employees in remote locations. And there's a lot that comes into play to that that has impacted the way our organizations have to interface and engage those employees, and a lot that we have to think about, right? And as director of marketing, I work really closely with our HR teams to understand culture and to understand how we're engaging our employees and really kind of dial in and lean in to make sure that we're doing everything we can to, you know, while we're in these different environments, we're promoting and engaging and all those things. A couple of things that I think, you know, as we have these conversations that we lean in on and that we think about are certainly of the diverse workforce that we have, right? So we have multi-generational aspects to all of our workforce. I think many of us in this room can agree that we have, you know, some of us have 45-year employees and some of us have, you know, a significant amount of new entrants and new employees, right? So there's varying degrees of what those individuals want and what they desire and what they're seeking, you know, from the value of their employers. And I think as organizations and leaders, we need to really lean in on that and listen to understand how can we better engage those individuals, how can we be attractive to new entrants into our industry. I think we can all agree there's a shortage of skilled labor, so we as an industry, and I encourage everybody to get creative and figure out how we can attract new individuals to this environment, to telecom, as careers, right? And I think that that's really important. Another thing that really comes to mind when I think about, you know, multi-generationally is how we're engaging individuals. Technology is a big player in all of that, right? So, you know, it's really important to think about because, you know, in 2025, 3 out of 4 employees will be millennials and a quarter of our workforce will be Gen Z. These are younger individuals who grew up with technology and, you know, they engage and learn very differently. So when I think about, you know, new technologies like virtual reality, VR, you know, implementing that into training as managers, you know, if we're challenged with how are we going to train and engage these employees, implementing a technology like that is a really innovative way to grab their attention and promote and engage them. So I think the work environment will continue to evolve and will continue to change. And it's really important for leaders and decision makers within organizations to listen and pay attention to, you know, really what their new entrants and what, you know, what the different generations that they have as employees, what they're desiring and what they need.
Yeah, those are great points on so many topics that you're hitting on regarding, I mean, employees need to understand what they can, you know, glean from a company and joining a workforce, but then also what the leaders of a company can do, like you said, to attract and retain employees. So thinking about all of that, Amelia, is there anything that you could add, thinking about maybe the potential impacts to the workforce, so either opportunities or threats or anything?
Yeah, actually I wanted to touch on the VR, AR piece of that. I was doing a panel recently on AR, VR, especially with workforce training, and one of the things that jumped out to me was the stats that the age group of 17 to 24-year-olds are the video gamers in in our communities, and they are so prone to learning through action orientation and video gaming that we have to really meet them where they are in terms of training the workforce. So I think things like that's very important for us to think about when we're trying to bring new people into our industry and train up. Also, when we think about diversity, you talked about diversity as being very important. When we think about diversity, you think about disabilities and so forth as well. Think about a VR training opportunity, someone sitting in a knock and being able to troubleshoot, but not necessarily be on site because they're not able to. So I think there are a lot of opportunities that automation and virtual reality brings to the training and allows people opportunities that they may not have had previously. And I know AI, for instance, is a big topic, and it could be scary to some. I guess I put my positive hat on and I think about, I don't want to do the routine task. I want to do the higher level work. So if automation can do some of that routine task and I can then be smarter about what I'm doing, be more efficient, then I'm all about AI.
Yep, absolutely. Well, and I've seen also, I know when we have talked with the telecom trailblazers, also talking about ways that they can do something like manhole training virtually before they ever go out in the field. So a lot of opportunities. And like you said, that really speaks to the Gen Z and the millennials. So thank you for that. So I want to transition a little bit and talk about culture, because I think culture is a buzzword that a lot of people are talking about. It's very important to employees, and a lot of folks, as they're being recruited, ask about the culture of an organization. So Deb, walk us through maybe talking a little bit about culture, the impact of a positive versus a negative culture in the workplace.
Absolutely. Building on the comments from both Monica and Amelia, think about your own career recruitment when you were recruited to serve in your current position. I bet none of you said, oh my God, I can't wait to work there. They have such a negative culture. You ask the questions, you understand there's an extraordinary amount of communication between you or the new potential employee and that recruiter. So the recruiter is doing a really great job keeping those lines of communication open and setting clear expectations. What happens is once you convert then from a candidate to an employee is often in the throes of a lot of heavy workload, communication suffers. And so you will find that the number one reason people leave is they don't feel valued and they don't feel that there was enough communication to keep you engaged. There is a lack of use of the tools and technologies that are available to really close that gap a little bit. So you've got potential negative cultural environments. So there may be a lot of skipping your lunch. There may be working a lot of overtime. There may be just a lack of interaction with your supervisor. So to flip it, to put that back into perspective, to start to build that positive culture and relationship, you've got to build trust. And so building trust is going to take some time, but it's well worth the investment. Trust is the one thing that can change everything with respect to productivity. So use those technologies that are available to you, set clear expectations, set clear goals, and if you actually go through roles and responsibilities for your employees, you will be amazed how many gaps you'll find, how you can close that gaps, and then really smooth out that workflow.
Yeah, thank you, Deb. So if there is an employee out there and they're saying, okay, I'm in with a company and I feel a little bit disengaged as a remote worker, I feel like maybe my job could be eliminated, or maybe I want to learn something different. Let's shift a little bit and talk about workforce development. So Amelia, if you can walk us through, because I know you're really on the forefront of talking with both communities and companies about workforce development. So one, what does that look like today, workforce development? And then a bigger question that I think I've heard a lot of people talk about is, are we ready for these big scale projects like BEAD?
Yeah. So we're really at an exciting time in our industry. If you guys were here earlier, you probably heard Patrick Hawley, our CEO of WIA, talk about BEAD, which is the Broadband Equity Access Deployment Program. It's administered by NTIA, Department of Commerce. And so we're really talking about an investment in our industry of $43 billion, billion with a B. And so that money is obviously aimed at bridging digital divide and really serving unserved, underserved areas. But think about those funds to be able to help workforce development, training and education for communities in which we live. So states have an opportunity. Again, it's historic funding and investment that states have an opportunity to accept these grants from the federal government to deploy this internet network across their states, but also use some of these funds for workforce development. As I'm meeting with them, they're not thinking about labor resources. They're only thinking about what areas are underserved or unserved, thinking about mapping. And so all of us in this room know that a network cannot be deployed if you don't have the skilled workforce. So over the past year, I've been having these conversations with the state, talking to them about this bottleneck challenge. Hey, if we don't have adequate resources in terms of labor to build the network will not be built. So spending time with them, talking to them about training the workforce, available workforce, diverse workforce, but also setting aside the money to be able to train the workforce, not just setting it aside for the actual infrastructure build. So I think that's important. The other thing that I've been talking to states about is we know that fiber is going to be the primary technology that will be deployed. But you heard Alex earlier, right? We're going to need a mix of technologies to be able to deploy across all the states. You're dealing with topography, you're dealing with different geographies. So fiber is just not going to cut it on its own. You're going to need wireless applications, fixed wireless applications. So I have a lot of those conversations with these states because many of them have been in government for a long time. Some of them don't know anything about broadband. So I've been leveraging my 25 years of experience, really talking about the different ways that we can absolutely bridge this digital divide, making sure that we have the labor resources and, of course, other resources as well. So leveraging not just my experience, but WIA, what we do is we convene industry with educators as well as government. So we typically bring in industry, companies like you guys, into some of those meetings. We talk about what needs there are to deploy the network. We talk about specific positions, occupations, how many, and then we look at what are the training resources available. I know Patrick earlier talked about apprenticeship, TIRAP, you mentioned that Deb leads our apprenticeship program at WIA. Well, within the Notice of Funding Opportunities for this BEAD program, it specifically calls out the need for apprenticeships, credentialed learning, industry validated learning. So that's some of the things we bring to the table when we meet with these states to make sure that we're trying to set them up for success.
Okay.
And I think you asked the question, are they ready? Not quite. They have a ways to go. So the more we can talk to our local municipalities and encourage them to think broadly about not just creating jobs, but creating careers that can spur on their economic development, that's the way to do it.
Yeah, and Deb, I know that's a natural segue for you to talk a little bit about TIRAP and how companies can get involved and support all of this workforce development and being ready for those larger scale projects.
Yeah, absolutely. It made me think when you're talking about putting together a workforce plan, right? That's one of the requirements under BEAD. You have to sit down and do an analysis first. So it used to be talent acquisition was the 4 Bs. So you could go out and buy the talent you needed. It was readily available off the street, post a job, interview, find who you need, give them a job offer, you're good to go. We've pretty much starting to see that's not as a big, deep pool as it used to be available. So that takes us to borrow. We have to borrow some talent. So there's great staffing agencies that are out there and available that are also out scouring for this talent to bring them on. You can take them on temporarily. You might try it before you buy it, but you're borrowing that talent for a little bit. Those pools are getting a little thin as well. That brings us to build. You can make the investment and build the workforce you need, and a great way to do that, near and dear to my heart, is registered apprenticeship. So registered apprenticeship, if you're not really familiar with it, a nice short definition is it's a systematic training approach that balances on-the-job skills development with some classroom learning, so they're getting the knowledge and theory that they need to be successful in their chosen occupation. This is all done with the oversight of a mentor. Building takes an investment. It can take time. We've got 104 employers that participate in registered apprenticeship now through TIRAP, and they've made the investment of time to build these really terrific programs. They're at all different stages of implementation, but they're getting there. And the last opportunity you have as you're putting together your workforce plan, particularly for BEAD funding, is bridge. How can I take that existing workforce that I have? How can I bridge them into opportunities for promotion? How can I bridge them over to maybe, we used to call it cross-training. How can I bridge them over to support the workforce shortage that I have? So the 4 Bs, buy, borrow, build, bridge, that'll help you. Apprenticeship can definitely earn you some points in building your workforce as well as bridging.
I love hearing about those 4 Bs because that really makes it concrete. And Monica, I know too, we've had a lot of discussions about, again, what employees can do, what they can ask of their employers as far as additional training and things like that. So what else would you add to workforce development opportunities and things like that you're seeing?
Yeah, so I think it's really important to note, earlier in Alex's conversation, he mentioned, there's these ebbs and flows we go through, right? And we've seen a slow in the industry. And so in those times, the labor force doesn't seem to be the pressing issue. It's when we ramp up that we really need to start to address that. But we have to start to build that pipeline, right? And we have to start to understand, look, we know that it's going to come back, and it's probably going to come back, hopefully sooner than what, some of the experts are saying. We have to build that pipeline and address, our labor force so that we don't have a shortage in those times. So, looking at opportunities as companies are diversifying, if wireless is slow, we're looking at other areas. That's also an opportunity to diversify workforce as well, right? So I love that, you're having conversations at the state and federal level, with the funding to ensure that there's training programs in place to support those initiatives, right? Because they're not prepared. They're not thinking about the need for labor. They're only thinking about the need to build and generate that revenue. That's great, but at the same time, like you said, that's not going to happen without a labor force. So we really have to make sure that we're building that pipeline and addressing those issues. And I think it's really key for all of our organizations within the industry to also think about how are we getting new individuals to this? How are we becoming attractive? Are we getting into schools? Are we getting into high schools, colleges, right? Is there a path to telecom as a career? And I know Patrick mentioned it this morning, something I'm also very passionate about because we continually have this issue of a shortage of labor. Well, it's really on us to provide a path to our industry. And so I think as we continue to have these conversations and press that issue, if we provide funding for organizations so that they can map that out and create that path, I think that there's a lot of success that we can build around that.
Yeah, absolutely. Amelia, where you can add something.
Yeah, I wanted to just punctuate what she said around career awareness. I think we, as an industry, need to do a better job in terms of making sure that we share all the opportunities that exist within our industries. My daughter's a first-year college student. She's in an engineering class, and I'm like, how's your class? She goes, I'm one of 2 girls in here. Yeah. Right? So I think we're making some movements in the right direction, but we have a long way to go. And we can do work in this room in terms of sharing the opportunities and all the different occupations within our industry and making sure that there's career awareness around broadband. And I'm not naive in terms of we've had a downturn in the wireless segment of our industry. So there are friends of ours, colleagues of ours, that perhaps don't currently have jobs or are currently looking for jobs. So what I would say to that, and I get a lot of calls because I worked for Crown Castle for 15 years. There was a lot of turmoil and change there recently. What I would say to that is look at your skill sets. See which one of those can be transferable to adjacent industries or even fiber if fiber is going to be part of the primary technology that will be deployed as BEAD. So I think there's huge opportunities to diversify our skills And regardless of a downturn in the industry, we should be looking at diversifying our skills, upskilling ourselves, reskilling ourselves. So I think it's important that we know that there are a lot of opportunities out there, and we have a lot of those skill sets that we can hone.
Yeah, and I would say to that too, don't wait for, the industry to hit you with, oh gosh, now you only have this one skill and we have nowhere to put you. But we can all navigate that ourselves and go to our employers and say, I want to map out what my next 5 or 10 year plan looks like. And then we all need to do it for ourselves to say, what do I want? Are there some skills that I would like to learn along the way? So as we close out here, I know we've touched on a lot of different topics, and in anticipation of this, it's funny because we all had discussions not only with each other, but just people asking questions like, talking about AI and how it will affect our careers and things like that. Any closing thoughts that you all have?
I'm really excited about AI. I know it's sometimes a bad word for some and it's a scary thing, but I think that we have an opportunity to utilize that technology to really, advocate for efficiencies, learn new ways to train. I mean, there's so many applications. It's also exciting because as it continues, the demand for AI and 5G, coupled together, if that continues to increase, that just helps us all out, right? So I think AI is a good thing. I don't know if that's a bad thing to say for all y'all, but I'm very excited to see kind of how companies will start to apply that and integrate that into their operations, how managers will use that to help train. I mean, there's so many opportunities. So I think, the more we look to technology to create efficiencies, the more attractive our industry and our companies come to younger generations, and we get, new entrants into our workforce and our labor force. And I think it's really important for all of us to kind of lean in on that and pay attention to it.
I was going to add with respect to occupation development. So as you're out and you're evaluating your teams and you're finding where you may have some gaps, contact WIA and let's talk. Maybe it's a apprenticeable occupation. If it's a job where it's best learned, let's say career. If it's an opportunity to have a career that's best learned on the job with supplementing with some related technical instruction or classroom training, we may have a apprenticeable occupation that can be developed. We've only created 16. Look around the room and tell me how many more occupations there are to develop within the industry. The opportunity is large. So reach out, let's have a conversation. You may be able to help us develop the next opportunity for the next high school person that's evaluating a career in the industry.
Yeah.
Thank you, Deb.
And I would add to that, while you're looking for those opportunities, also look for the training and development that's available at your state, because they're funding a lot of these programs, and enrollment in a lot of these broadband courses are low. So encourage others and look at those yourselves, because again, a lot of this training and education is free. Take advantage of them.
Right. Thank you. Well, are there, I know we just have a couple of minutes left. Are there any questions that anyone has for the panelists? All right. Yes.
We're done.
As far as AI, are any of y'all aware of any training companies or contractors using it, like virtual reality in training? Like I've seen with like crane trucks and boom trucks that can take apart and go to the room and the floor. Is that happening anywhere right now that you're aware?
WIA has, as part of the Ohio Broadband and 5G Sector Partnership, worked with an organization to build, no, it's not AI, it's VR. We currently have a fiber optic technician, a tower technician, and I think a directional boring simulation with the goggles that you can use. So we've used them at a couple events. She's doing the Ohio work. So I'm kind of stealing
actually,
her
the state of Ohio is purchasing some of those headsets for some of the different schools and universities to continue that training program, because it's been a successful program for them.
Yeah, so we demoed at the NATE Unite. We had the goggles on site, so if anybody had a chance to use them, we'll love to have your feedback. We'll do it again at ConnectX that's coming up in May. And we've also got opportunities to loan them out. So the TIRAP employers, of which Jordan is one, if you went to a career fair and wanted to borrow it, we could give you a tutorial on how to use it, and you could take it with you to your career fair.
Yeah, and then I was going to say, I referenced that I saw in the Verizon Innovation Lab in San Francisco. They had one that, again, was like manhole training. So again, that virtual reality, but training someone on everything, the manhole work and without actually going in there. So a neat way to incorporate that training in a classroom environment.
I think it's really important to note that it's such an opportunity, to create a real world environment without, adding the risk of some of the safety factors that happen when you're on site in a real world environment, right? So it's kind of like the precursor to going out on site and training. It's a huge opportunity for companies to take advantage of. So I love that we continue to kind of create these, these environments and these opportunities for VR to be implemented into training.
Right. Well, thank you all for coming and listening to our panel. We appreciate your time.